This morning, my question: what causes racial inequality? Plus, the tarnish on the Cosby star. And how to move toward healing in the midst of persistent injustice. But first, the challenges posed by She Said, He Said. Good morning, I'm Melissa Harris Perry. 2 years ago today, a sexual assault was alleged to have been committed by Florida State University quarterback and reigning Heisman Trophy winner Jameson Winston against a female student at the university. Winston was never arrested following an investigation of the allegations, nor did he face any criminal charges because a prosecutor for the state of Florida found there was insufficient evidence. According to an investigative report from Fox Sports in October, that criminal investigation was hampered when Florida State University officials and Tallahassee police took steps to both hide and then hinder it. So the adjudication of his innocence or guilt and the consideration of the claims of his accuser were left in the hands of the university, and more specifically, Florida State University's student conduct process. On Wednesday, the culmination of that process ended after a 2-day hearing in which Winston declined to answer questions about the alleged assault. Instead, for the first time, he spoke for himself, telling his version of the events that happened that night in a 5-page statement that he read during the hearing. His accuser identified him as the man who raped her 1 month after the alleged assault. But in his statement, Winston claimed that sexual acts between himself and the woman happened with her full knowledge and consent. And he ended it with the account with the toll that he says the allegations have taken on his life, concluding, rape is a vicious crime. The only thing as vicious as rape is falsely accusing someone of rape. The judge presiding over the hearing may not issue a decision until as late as January. But this week, a new development in another story in which a young woman alleges to have been raped by university classmates has brought renewed attention to that equivalence between actually being raped and being accused of rape. Last Sunday on this program, I spoke with Sabrina Erdley, the writer of a Rolling Stone article that told the story of a University of Virginia student identified only as Jackie, who said she had survived a horrific and brutal rape at a fraternity party in 2012. The article also indicted the university for its inability or unwillingness to commit to securing justice for students who are survivors of sexual assault. The article sparked national outrage, casting UVA as the poster child for the institutional failure to address the pervasive problem of campus sexual assault. It prompted the university to hold an emergency meeting to begin the process of reviewing and revamping its policies, to begin addressing its shortcomings in handling these cases. And then, this week, the story took a turn when it was called into question by the very journalistic organization that initially published it. On Friday, Rolling Stone released a note to readers saying, in the face of new information, there now appear to be discrepancies in Jackie's account, and we have come to the conclusion that our trust in her was misplaced. We were trying to be sensitive to the unfair shame and humiliation many women feel after a sexual assault and now regret the decision to not contact the alleged assaulters to get their account. Rolling Stone's retraction did not include details about the exact nature of those new developments or discrepancies, but a Washington Post investigation calls into question some key elements of Jackie's story, as told in Rolling Stone. Post reporters took the extra step that Rolling Stone decided against and interviewed the man Jackie recently named to friends as her alleged attacker. The man said he'd never met Jackie in person. And according to the Post, that student belongs to a different fraternity, and no one by that name has ever been a member of Phi Kappa Psi. The Phi Kappa Psi fraternity also disputed some of the Rolling Stone claims. A statement released Friday said no member of the fraternity worked in 2012 at the Aquatic Center, where the story says Jackie met her attacker, and that there was no social event held at the fraternity's UVA chapter the day of the alleged assault. Despite the inconsistencies identified since the publication of the Rolling Stone article, Jackie, who was interviewed several times by the Washington Post, stands by her account of what happened and gave details to the Post that were very similar to the original story. Whatever the details of the story that still remain in dispute, we need look no further than what happened at Duke University in 2007 to understand the consequences of allowing an individual accusation to shift focus from the all too credible and common claims of sex assault survivors. That year, after a 2006 rape accusation against the Duke lacrosse team made national headlines. The alleged victim was completely discredited by physical and DNA evidence that cleared the accused men of any sexual misconduct against her. Michael Nifong, the district attorney in Durham, resigned, was disbarred, and spent a day in jail for criminal contempt. But the rightfully disproven story of the accuser also undermined the credibility of the very legitimate questions of race, of violence, and vulnerability raised by members of the Duke community who had initially come to her defense. And what's more, by aligning themselves out of trust with an accuser who was not telling the truth, it only exacerbated the shame that keeps so many survivors silent about their stories. In the Duke lacrosse case, justice for the wrongfully accused players came at the expense of a dialogue that could have prompted meaningful institutional changes to the larger problem of campus sexual assault. And it was a reminder, as we consider national policy approaches that respond to the concerns of survivors, that the reality of sexual assault is much bigger than a single story. Joining me now is Dave Zirin, sports editor for The Nation magazine and author of Brazil's Dance with the Devil, the World Cup, the Olympics, and the Fight for Democracy. Zerlina Maxwell is a political analyst and contributor to Ebony.com. Jonathan Metzl, director of the program in Medicine, Health, and Society, and professor of psychiatry at Vanderbilt University, and also author of The Protest Psychosis. And Lisa Litt, clinical psychologist and visiting scholar at the Teachers College at Columbia University and co-author of Trauma Services for Women in Substance Abuse Treatment, an Integrated Approach. I want to start with you, Dave,
Sure.
Particularly on this Florida State story, because in the context of Florida State, in the context of Duke, there was a discussion not only about the individual case, but about sports culture. Mm-hmm. In the case of UVA, it was about fraternity culture.
Sure.
In what gets lost in a he said, she said about an individual act, what gets lost in a larger conversation about those cultures that are indicted?
Absolutely. I mean, what gets lost, in this case, is that Jameis Winston is a cash cow for Tallahassee. And that's the bizarre thing about this, because the Jameis Winston case brings together two streams of some of the ugliest annals of American oppression. And that's why it sparks so many emotions. Yep. Because it's the historical idea that black men, particularly in the South, are falsely accused of sexual assault, and the idea that women who bring forward claims of sexual assault are slandered and destroyed for doing so. Yet it comes with this 21st century political economy twist. Yep. And that's that Jameis Winston is somebody who brings in $10 million every game day. His coach, Jimbo Fisher, makes more money than any public official in the state of Florida, over $4 million a year. And the police who are looking into the case are people who make money through an organization called the Seminole Boosters to provide security on game day. And of course, Jameis Winston does not make a dime. What he is paid with is something that I refer to as the gutter economy of the NCAA, which means they look out for him in situations like this. And this is a crazy thing in a moment where we're talking about the issue that Black Lives Matter. Right. And you look at people like Eric Garner and Michael Brown, people whose lives were deemed as disposable. And then you look at Jameis Winston, someone who is in effect has a peculiar kind of privilege in Tallahassee in that he finds himself to be protected. But none of that excuses the insane misogyny of the letter that Jameis Winston and his lawyers produced, which is beneath contempt. And actually, it could be in a show starring Viola Davis called How to Get Away with Rape, because it checks every box in terms of how to shame survivors into silence.
Right. Okay. So on the one hand, all of those things can be true, and yet also don't necessarily make right. So he can be part of this gutter economy. He can have a special kind of privilege protection as a result of his athlete status. It can be true that he has written a horribly misogynist statement, and he may in fact not be a rapist, right? Like that all of those things can be true at the same time. And I think that's part of what's hard for me, Zerlina. When I read that line, that the only thing as vicious as rape is being accused of rape. So the survivor inside of me stood up and was like, no, that is wrong. And then the African-American historian inside of me who knows about the black men's bodies that were in fact viciously attacked and destroyed behind the false accusations of rape in another century was like, well, And I just was left with, so what do we do in this moment?
Well, I think in this moment, it's not the past. It's not a moment in which there are, false allegations that are just popping up every day. At this moment, the FBI puts that percentage at 2 to 8%, which is less than car theft. So I think that, for the most part, statistics, 98% of the allegations are going to turn out to be true. And I think that when people come forward, we should default to, compassion and empathy as opposed to automatic skepticism.
In fact, you wrote this for the WashingtonPost.com.
Yeah.
We should believe, as a matter of default, what an accuser says. Ultimately, the cost of wrongly disbelieving a survivor far outweigh the cost of calling someone a rapist. Even if Jackie fabricated her account, UVA should have taken her word for it during the period while they endeavored to prove or disprove the accusation. This is not a legal argument. This is a moral one.
Right. I think that, we all have to take ourselves outside of the court system because, we're not a judge and jury. And this is not about due process because it's not about innocent until proven guilty when we're just sort of talking and someone's coming forward to you and saying, I've been sexually assaulted. Is your first default response skepticism? Well, are you sure? Were you drinking? What were you wearing? Or are you going to say, are you okay? Do you need help? I can help support you. And that's the world that I want to live in, and it's not the current world we live in right now.
Let me let you in on this, Jonathan.
Well, a couple of points. I think these points are spot on. One is that it's an understandable journalistic strategy that we use the individual narrative to make a point about the larger whole. The flip side of that, of course, you can personalize with those stories and it makes them more understandable. The flip side is, if there are problems with the individual narrative, then all of a sudden it gives people this platform to default the bigger issue. And here there is such a huge problem with sexual assault on campus. Colleges are just starting to address this, and so in a way, the hard part is this journalistic point of the individual standing in for the communal.
Why do you think that we need the perfect victim? I mean, it does seem to me that, you made you tie together these lovely threads of how we're thinking about this moment around race and vulnerability, for example, in Ferguson or here in New York, along with this. And they do seem to touch, for me, Dr. Litt, on this question of the need for the perfect victim. And what the UVA Rolling Stone story initially was a kind of perfect victimology story that now seems like, okay, it may be more complicated, as largely much sexual assault is.
Right, it always is much more complicated. And the unfortunate thing is that there is this belief that somehow if a victim was perfect, that makes it easier to go forward with a case. And the fact that everything is in fact much messier makes it much more difficult also for survivors to come forward.
Yes.
Right? So people ask,
because your own sense of being,
yes. Right, and if you have any questions at all, which every rape survivor does, even in the most obvious cases where there's been sexual coercion, and violence, did I somehow do something wrong? What did I do that somehow contributed it? Should I have been doing something differently? So all of those things make it difficult for somebody to come forward, and especially when there's this belief that, like, right, I don't look like somebody. Who somebody else would believe.
We're going to stay on this topic. Everybody's going to stick around. Zerlina is going to be back in just a moment because I got to bring in one more person because up next, Rolling Stone, UVA, and the impact on all survivors.